So today's lesson we're going to be talking about adding and subtracting decimals. As you can see right here, I have two examples of one being an adding and one being a subtracting. The big thing to remember is we need to line up the decimal points. With adding and subtracting decimals, as long as you line up the decimal places, everything else is just like normal adding and subtracting. So we have 6.28 plus 3.41 on my question number 1 right here. So what I'm going to do first is line up those decimal points. Now, in this problem it happens to be okay, all right, and we can see that you have 6.28, 3.41. The digits are actually going to line up nice with each other. So we write, let's see here, 6.28. Let's fix that 6 there. All right, 6.28 plus 3.41, 3.41, and I just add straight down. 8 plus 1 is 9. 2 plus 4 is that's 6. 6 plus 3 is 9. And the nice thing is, when I'm adding and subtracting decimals, my decimal, since they had to be lined up right there, they should be lined up right in my answer as well. So my answer, 9.69. And you can see they're all lined up with each other. Now with subtraction, I do the exact same thing. Okay, let's not forget, in case we have to borrow, don't forget to borrow. So you have 8.73 minus 1.52. Okay, and now I just subtract. 3 minus 2, that's going to be 1. 7 minus 5, that is 2. And 8 minus 1, that is 7. Decimal comes straight down to my answer. So my answer is 7.21. Now, those are my basic type of questions. But we're not always going to have nice decimals where they have the same amount of digits and the decimals line up directly nice with each other. So I have two examples down here. And they both happen to be with whole numbers. I have 9 plus 4.21, and I have 14 minus 6.83. Now, the most common thing that people do is when they add these, they're like, oh, okay, 4.21 and 9. And they forget to line up the decimal points, and they go about adding, and they get, 4.30. And then this is the way I like to talk with my kids. I'm like, how did we get from 9 and pretty much 4 back down to 4? All right. We should be able to self-assess and be like, oh, that doesn't make sense. All right, so I need to look at, okay, 9. Where is my decimal point on 9? We always know that with our whole numbers, the decimal point goes to the right of the number. So it's actually 9 point right there. So, and then we can actually do that real quick over here. With 14, it's actually 14 point because it's always to the right of my number. So I come down here and I write 9 points. Okay. Well, now I need 4.21. I need my decimal places to line up. So it goes 4.21. All right, we're adding. And what we need to do now is we need to balance out our problem. All right, I have empty spots up here, so I'm going to fill those empty spots with 0. Notice 9 and 9.00, the exact same thing. All right, it's worth the same value, so I did not change this. We are adding here, so 0 plus 1 is 1, 2 plus 0 is 2, 9 plus 4, that should be 13. Decimal comes straight down in the answer. I get 13.21 for my answer. Now over here on number 4, it should go 14 point, we're subtracting, and 6.83. Remember, that decimal point and this decimal point need to be lined up. 6.83. I see some empty spots. I'm going to fill them with zeros. There's an empty spot. There's an empty spot. And there's actually an empty spot right here also. I'm going to fill that with a 0 also. Now, 0 minus 3. I cannot do that. All right. If I don't have anything, I can't give 3 of that away. Okay, so I need to borrow. I go here. Well, there's nothing to borrow from. It's still a 0. So they go over to the 4 and borrow something from the 4. That becomes a 3. And I like to show this. And that becomes a 10 now. All right, that's a 1 and a 0. Well, this 0 over here, he still doesn't have anything. So he needs to borrow one more time. He borrows from that 10, and it becomes a 9. And that becomes a 10. And now we should be pretty good so far. 10 minus 3, well, that's 7. 9 minus 8, well, that's 1. 3 minus 6, oh, I can't do that. So I need to borrow. That becomes a 0, and that becomes a 13. Now 13 minus 6 I can do. I should get 7. Decimal point comes straight down into the answer, and I get 7.17. So, 3 things to really remember. Number 1, line up the decimal points. You will get it wrong if you do not line up the decimal points. Number 2, add zeros in empty spots. And number 3, don't forget, add and subtract normally. And remember that decimal, literally, just like in number 1, it says line up the decimal points, and the answer, it should also be lined up too. So that's going to be adding and subtracting decimals.